It prevents the emergence of a democratic state that will also be another ally of the United States. It preoccupies NATO in peacekeeping, conflict resolution. Frozen conflicts are good for Russia. They enjoy status quos. This is why, again, I agree with Nick. I don't think Kosovo's independence is going to precipitate Russia grabbing Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and Transnistria. These are territories in Georgia and Moldova that Russia, in a way, supervises. Or, let's say, sort of supports proxies or semi-proxies in these territories that keep those states divided. I think Russia prefers to have divided states. It prefers to have proxies. It prefers to have countries that aren't integrated and therefore do not fully qualify for NATO membership or European Union membership in the case of Moldova. Anyway, what I do think the win-win situation, in other words, if it's frozen, we win. If it's not frozen, in other words, if it's unfrozen, there is a declaration of independence, there is an acceptance of independence, which I think will happen in waves rather than the European Union as a whole. I think it will be 2 or 3 waves of recognition. Russia also gains. It gains, and I've listed sort of several ways in which it will gain. First of all, let me say that Russia will claim then that it is the major defender of international legality. And up to a degree, if you understand the United Nations system, which I have serious doubts about anyway, as the defender of international legality, fine. You know, logic of that argument, yes, it works. However, Russia is not consistent because Russia would not allow the same principles, in other words, even a United Nations mission, on certain territories that it supervises, in Transnistria, where it has its own peacekeepers, despite the fact that Moldova has declared itself as a neutral state and does not want Russian peacekeepers on its territory, including in the breakaway region. Russia consistently violates the UN Charter. I won't say too much about Chechnya here. That's, I'm not sure whether you've had meetings on Chechnya, but Russian policy in Chechnya isn't exactly in the spirit of the legal order, let's put it that way. Secondly, Russia is posing as a promoter of multilateralism. In other words, the UN, particularly where the UN process actually serves its interests and undercuts those of the US. I have my strong reservations about some multilateral institutions work, others don't. I have strong reservations about the UN Security Council, which, if you look back again into recent history, stood by and did very little as the Soviet Union occupied half of Europe. Was this the legal order? Well, again, that question can be answered maybe on another panel another day. In any case, I think the UN Security Council, I think what this will indicate is that the UN Security Council is also in need of reform. Through, for example, expansion, to become more representative and effective. Why should it be limited to 5 countries? And there should be some sort of majority voting. Why should one country be able to block the decisions of the majority? Thirdly, I think Moscow is also posing as a staunch protector of state sovereignty, i.e. particularly vis-à-vis Serbia, by opposing the breakup of a UN member state. Okay, fair enough. It doesn't look at the reasons why Kosovo is in a position it is, why it is an international protectorate. Serbia basically, I don't think Dan said this, but Serbia wants the territory of Kosovo, not the population. In other words, the population of Kosovo is disenfranchised. Even according to the logic of Serbian political structure, why wasn't the Albanian population of Kosovo included in the referendum, in the presidential elections, in the parliamentary elections, in fact in no elections? Serbia has already recognized the independence of these people. What it still refuses to recognize, de jure, is the independence of the territory in which they live, in which they form over 90% of the population. Fourth, I think Kosovo forms, and I think this is even more important, forms part of a wider strategic agenda for Russia that enables Moscow to elevate its international position. It now interposes in the Balkans. Russians had troops in Pristina at the airport and in parts of Kosovo up till a few years ago. I think 2003 they withdrew. And I remember at the time the Russian government said, we will be back. In a way they are back, but not as military, but they're back diplomatically. They're back vis-à-vis energy interests. They're back vis-à-vis supporting one of the countries, i.e. Serbia, as a wedge in Southeast Europe. They're back in other neighboring countries, particularly in Bulgaria. They're trying to maneuver into Hungary, in other countries in which they can expand their energy networks and through that increasing their political influence. I think, sort of moving a little bit beyond that, because the question is, what will happen after independence? I think the situation in the Balkans is manageable, and I think Dan has pointed this out. Post-independence, I think NATO, the EU, and the US, if they work in tandem, they will prevent any further destabilization. In fact, I do believe that independence for Kosovo is important for all the neighbors, including for Macedonia and Montenegro, because there are extremist Albanian elements who, if there is no independence, no imminent indication, no imminent declaration and acceptance of independence, that they will then not accept the current existing borders with Macedonia and Montenegro. And if you talk privately to members of the Macedonian government, they would prefer to have an independent Kosovo that recognizes, whereby Pristina recognizes the border with Macedonia.